I don't think I would have ever done the podcast because I didn't really have anybody. Not that you were like telling me like I have homework, like there wasn't anybody telling me. But if you log in into these meetings weekly and you're surrounded by women who are working towards something similar, like a business, or they're working on themselves trying to build courage, then it's kind of like forcing you to like do your own homework and like focusing on like your tasks to complete the goal that you want to get into.
Welcome to the Chingona Revolution podcast, where we will bring out your inner badass Latina, overcome self-doubt, help you gain clarity, and pave your own path, all while leading with courage. I am your host, Latina coach and speaker, Erica Cruz. Hello. Welcome back to this week's episode of Chingona Revolution podcast. Today, we're talking all about the journey to launching a podcast and the courage that it takes to first make the decision to do it, but then all of the micro decisions that have to take place in order to actually create a podcast. And coming from somebody who thought about a podcast for years, like myself, I know that it really does take a lot of courage. And for those of you who are listening, you've maybe thought about like, oh yeah, one day I want to launch a podcast. And maybe you've had the thoughts of, but there's already so many podcasts out there. Why would I do it? Things like that. And these are all normal doubts that come up. But Anahi Bravo, who is my client and has been my client for a little over a year, you've completed a year in Courage Driven Latina. The last time we had her on the podcast, she was about to launch her podcast, but now she has a full-blown podcast with guests, and just like energetically seeing you on here right now, you are just energetically different this time around as compared to last time. So before we get into the actual interview, for people who don't know you and maybe haven't heard your last podcast episode, can you just quickly introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Erica, for having me. First of all, my name is Anahi Bravo, and I am the host of Querida Latina podcast. I am a first generation Mexican American, and like she said, I created my own podcast. And a little bit about me is I am 26 years old. I live in Houston, Texas, born and raised. And a little bit more about me is that I enjoy working out. I enjoy spending time with family. I'm a dog mom and I love coffee. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Love it. So, Anahi, can you tell us, a year ago, you didn't have a podcast yet. I actually remember coaching you on wanting to launch a podcast. Can you tell us some of the doubts or the thoughts that you had before you actually took the steps to launching the podcast?
Well, first, the initial thought of creating a podcast was probably like in 2022 when I had recently quit my first job as a recent graduate. And I had quit my job because I just wasn't fulfilled. And so I didn't really have a backup plan. And so while I was jobless, I was just doing a lot of research, trying to find a career, like trying to find a job, but also trying to find something else that would take my time out of would take my time out of feeling overwhelmed. And I had thought of the idea of creating a podcast because I had been listening to a lot of podcasts, a lot of like career pivoting podcasts, and trying to like listen to Latina podcasts as well. And I initiated those thoughts, and then I really didn't act up on it. Like it was just an idea, but I think that I didn't act upon it. It was because I didn't really have any guidance. I didn't know where to start. I did attempt to do some research, but I just never got the confidence to start.
Yeah, and I remember coaching you on this at the beginning, and you knew you wanted to start a podcast. And what you're describing is what I call passive action, where, because like I was stuck in this too, right? I'm not calling you out, just literally everybody listening, I'm sure, can relate to this, where we have a desire to do something and we're like, well, I'm just going to research it. And that feels like we're taking steps forward, but then you research it and then more doubt creeps in. It's like, oh my gosh, there's actually a lot of work that goes into this. So when you were doing your research, I know that you were the one who inspired me to create the podcast course inside of Courage Driven Latina because of coaching you. So thank you for that. But what were some of your doubts that stopped you from going after it? Were you thinking like, oh, there's already a lot of podcasts, or what are people going to care what I have to say? Like, what were some of the maybe doubts that crept in that maybe just kept you in the research mode and didn't actually allow you to start?
One of the things that I was just struggling with is just putting myself out on social media. Like, that's one thing that was just like, what are people going to say if I put myself out on social media? Like, why do people care about my 2 cents? Just things related to those topics. Like, I just didn't have the confidence to put myself out there. And those are just kind of like some struggles that I had in mind. But yeah, those are like the main ones. And I don't know, I was just like, it's not gonna be possible. Like, there's just no way that I'm gonna do this. So that's why I think that I came across your page and I was like, maybe like hiring somebody or taking time to, I guess, be involved in the community or something else that could really push me to exceed my limits and push me out of my own comfort zone was probably the next step for me. I kind of thought about it. I was looking through your profile and I was like, well, she kind of helps people do different kind of businesses. She helps different women. And I wanted to do something related to like Latina women. That's like what my goal was Latina. Like, I kind of wanted to stay within that theme, just because I mean, I'm Latina, obviously, but it just held so much. Um, it's kind of like a personality, obviously, because I am Latina, if that makes sense. But yeah, those are kind of some of the things that I navigated throughout this process. And that's when I came across you.
And now you're the host of the Querida Latina podcast. So you definitely accomplished what it was that you wanted. So tell me about, okay, the thoughts that you mentioned of like, why do people care what I have to say? And, there's this fear of putting myself out there. This is such a normal human fear because humans are wired for connection. We're wired for community. And in our culture, especially like you're the eldest daughter of immigrant parents, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so you're literally leading the way in your family. And I mean, we grow up sometimes hearing like, "Oh, be careful, you don't want people talking about you or what are people going to say about you?" And we're programmed to worry so much more about what other people think about us than what we think about ourselves. And a lot of times that stops us from sharing our magic. So, now that you have your podcast, how does it feel to get DMs from people with like, "Oh my gosh, this podcast really resonated," or even just like when you're interviewing your guests and you have these really meaningful, amazing conversations, or even your solo episodes? How do you feel now?
It feels so good. It feels so good because I went my whole life not having anybody to really look up to, like, because you said, like, I am the first gen and I'm the eldest. So I didn't have a lot of people to look up to that could relate to me and my life. Like, yeah, I have my parents that I look up to, but nothing like a woman, an older sister, like an older women that could basically kind of like tell me the way it is, like guide me, or somebody that could help me throughout these like life moments. And so being able to connect with women that are like-minded, women that are trying to build something for themselves was kind of life-changing for me, I would say, because it made me step into another, I don't know, another place, it made me build a little bit more confidence because my whole life I didn't really have confidence in myself as a young girl. I really was, I mean, I was outspoken. I'm not outspoken, but I was just like kind of shy, but myself, but I really wouldn't talk too much. So I think being around women like that kind of gave me the confidence that I needed to step up and create this podcast. And just being able to interview women, and a lot of them are older women. Fun fact is, like, They are a little bit older than me, which I think is good because I've really needed that my whole life. Just being able to get some advice from them, being able to learn about them and their journeys and understand that like this is just the beginning. I'm barely 26 and it's like I'm barely figuring it out, and actually you never really have it figured out because compared to the women that I interview, like they're still trying new things. They're trying to build businesses in their 30s and their 40s, and it just reminds me that I need to continue to not settle for less and just be very open-minded about what the future holds.
I love it. And I think the reason that your podcast works so well is because you treat them almost like these informational interviews with things that you want to know. And you just happen to have an audience that's also there that gets to listen in. So you're essentially fulfilling that need of wanting a mentor in your life because you didn't really have one. But not only are you doing that for yourself, you're doing it for your listeners too. And that's amazing. I feel like that makes some of the best podcasts when it's like you're genuinely interested in learning because you're going to ask the good interview questions. You're going to also be able to share that with other people, and everybody gets to benefit from that. So that's amazing.
No, yeah, I agree. Like this is definitely healing a part of me. I think that also for like the younger part of me who didn't get the guidance that they needed. So I think like one of my goals is like for the audience to be younger listeners as well who can take a lot of this information in. So I think it's really like you said it, you know, it's something that I learned for myself, but also for other women, other younger audiences, and also the women that are my age as well.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us how you overcame the struggles of what are people going to think and why does anybody care what I have to say? How did you, because we already got the before and the after, but it was a process, right? So what helped you overcome those obstacles and actually start even with the fear?
Honestly, like I'm going to be really honest, those thoughts still come into my mind, but I still show up even with those thoughts. But I think one of the main reasons why I finally got the audacity to create this podcast was because I was like, you know what? Like, this is something that I've thought about for a couple years now, and it never leaves my mind. And the fact that, like, I go to sleep thinking about it, like, what will happen if I create this? What will happen if I end up actually doing something out of my comfort zone? Like, all these what ifs. I wasn't going to just sleep at night knowing, like I wasn't just gonna, if I kept thinking about these things and I didn't act upon them, then I would have been like, okay, who would have really known what happened if I didn't act upon it this? So I wasn't gonna continue living my life listening to my intuition, and not act up on it because life is so short. I really learned that life is really short, and a lot of the times people have dreams and they don't really act upon them just because they care about what people think, what are people going to say. And till this day I still think about those things, I'm not going to lie, but I still show up regardless because I already started. So I'm not going to just let it, like I'm not gonna let it go just because I those thoughts still come up into my mind. I just try to learn how I learned how to coach myself when I go through these thoughts. I think that your program really helped me understand that coaching yourself is really important, because sometimes you just don't have you don't have anybody to really go to whenever these things come up. So really coaching yourself, really having your own back is really important. I was just like, you know what, like I'm gonna do it. I have free time, so might as well just make use for it.
Yeah, definitely. And you described this beautifully about these thoughts and the doubts don't ever really fully go away. Even if you're feeling a lot more confident, there's still going to be moments of like, oh man, this was a risky episode. What are people going to think about this? Or the production of this one wasn't that great. Damn it, the lighting wasn't good, and it's like all these things that can come up for us. And you just described what courage is. And courage is to like feel the fear, but still take the action. And so for you to not let those doubts be the ones that essentially are in control, right? Like your higher self is in control, your courageous self is in control. And it's like the little doubts and the fears just kind of take the back seat rather than the driver's seat. They're not the ones navigating. And that is, in my opinion, the key to a fulfilling life. Like, how can you not let, because doubt is always going to come up. It always is. I mean, even I experience doubt. I think people think, oh, yeah, you've had your podcast for X amount of time, but there's still doubt that happens in my mind, like every day. And to your point about coaching ourselves, I feel like my journal is my best therapist. Like, I still have a therapist, but my journal is really my best therapist because it's kind of always there when I need it. I love it. Hey, if you don't want another year to go by where you are just thinking about your goals and dreams, then listen up. I'm hosting a free webinar titled How to Make 2025 Your Courage Year. How to create massive change in 90 days without overthinking. This is happening on Monday, December 9th at 5 o'clock Pacific time. And this is 5 p.m. Pacific time. So if you are in Central time, this is going to be 7 o'clock your time. If you're on Eastern time, 8 o'clock your time, all p.m. In this webinar, you will learn why 2025 is the year to step into your courage and why the decisions that you make today dictate your 2025. You're going to learn why fear has kept you feeling stuck in your life and in your business. And you're going to go from thinking about your dream project to actually starting version 1 and completing version 1 in just 90 days. You're going to learn the 3 strategies that have helped me and my clients step into courage to start the business, launch the podcast, level up in their career, negotiate their salary, show up more confidently in dating, and so much more. This webinar is for you if you are ready to discover your purpose and go after it. Maybe you're already successful on paper, but you feel like something is missing or you feel like you're being called for more. This is for you if you are ready to lead with courage, build confidence, and maybe you want to create content or start a business or pivot in your career. It's also for you if your dreams are currently only living in your head or in your journal, but you are ready to make them a reality. This is for you if you've been putting everybody else's needs before your own and you're ready to work on you. It's you time. You're like, it is me season. There has never been a more important time for women to step into their courage, to step into their power. Tell your friends. Make sure that you register for this webinar. Again, it is happening on Monday, December 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. This webinar is completely free and it is sponsored by Courage Driven Latina. At the end of the webinar, you are going to learn more about my program, Courage Driven Latina, which is a transformational 12-month group coaching program to help you gain clarity, build confidence, and community. And in this program, you are going to learn how to execute not just one courage project. I mean, on average, the people that have been in this program for a year work on 4 to 5 courage projects in that year. Again, you'll learn all about it at the webinar. There will be a special 48-hour bonus for those of you who attend the webinar. I'm going to say this again. There has never been a more important time for women to take ownership of their lives. We cannot continue to live in fear. I want to remind you that courage doesn't mean that you don't feel fear. Okay, we all feel fear. We are all human beings. But courage means that you take action despite feeling the fear. What we need as women right now is to exercise our courage muscle. We cannot keep letting fear stop us from taking action. We have to take the action even if we are scared. And in this webinar, I'm going to teach you the mindset that you need to have, as well as the 3 strategies, again, that have helped me and over 200 clients go from thinking about this idea to holding it in their hands. I can't wait to see you there. Be sure to tell a friend and let's do this. So obviously your main courage project, the main thing you worked on with your podcast, have you worked on anything else inside of the program?
Ooh, I've done a lot of work. Honestly, like it wasn't just the podcast. Like I didn't join just because of the podcast. I was struggling a lot with setting boundaries with my family members. Since I do live at home, I always had the responsibility of being the oldest and be the responsible one to kind of look after my family, help my parents with things such as like translating, just life things. And so I just had a difficulty with that. And one of the things, those are some of the things that Courage Driven Latina has helped me with because I've been able to connect with women who coach on boundaries. Liz, I was able to connect with her. So she kind of helped me learn a little bit about boundaries, and just being able to, I don't know, I learned so many things by joining the program because every girl has a difficulty and they share it, and we learn so much from that one one set of coaching. So I think that it's just been an ongoing process. I'm not the person who I was last year. I've learned to really just kind of like advocate for myself, put myself first while also taking care of myself, not letting people like walk over me. That's one of the things that I kind of struggled with back in high school. And just, yeah, just being authentically myself, learning that I need to love myself and I need to be authentic. And that's what people are going to relate to. And that's why I created the podcast.
Yeah, I remember coaching on this. I remember coaching on because you also work from home, right? So I don't know if you work from home every day, but at least I remember coaching you that you were working from home and your family saw you there. So they just assumed you were available, which is something that I think a lot of people dealt with when the transition to working from home became a lot more common. I mean, I dealt with it too, where my mom would just like walk into the room because she's like, "Oh, aquí estás, you're here, so like you can help me with this," and it's like I'm in the middle of a meeting. Um, so I remember coaching on this, and that was like I think your first unofficial courage project because I don't think we had the courage project plans at that point because you joined, yeah, you joined before we had the new system. So that was like your unofficial courage project, and then that's when you started working on the podcast, and then even the podcast I feel like was a lot of little courage projects, right? Like having the courage to decide on a name. I remember you were overthinking the name, and I was like, you can always change it. And how do you feel now about the name? Because it was something that you went back and forth on a lot. So looking back from this moment back to when you were overthinking the name, what are your thoughts now?
Like that, choosing the name was one of the biggest struggles. I think I just set up, like, I worked on that for like a couple months, trying to decide, trying to get opinions, trying to get other people's 2 cents. But I feel like the name now, I love it. I love it. That's all I can say is because it's kind of like little interviews, little stories that I get to share with other Latinas that they could resonate with. So it's like Querida Latina, like a little letter to you, but in a
Yeah.
podcast form. And so I love it. I'm so glad. I'm happy for the process. Like I really did appreciate the process because this was a project that I was gonna put my all into. And yeah, I did
Mhm.
go back and forward with the name a lot, but that's just part of who I am. Like I try to really just make sure that if I do something, it's because I'm gonna genuinely put my all into. And the name was like, no, it has to sound good. I have to find something that fits well. And so that's why it took me a lot of time. And yeah, I'm glad that we went with that name. And yeah, I really do appreciate the process. It's part of the process and going back
It
and
is.
forward. But I'm so happy with it. I really am.
Yeah, this what you just described is what I call the courage dance. It's like you're kind of, here and there and here and there, and it's part of the process to your point. But I think where people get stuck or where they struggle is where they're like, oh, I shouldn't be, going back and forth. I just need to, and they shame themselves for it. But the fact that you're able to like honor your process and be on the other side and be like, yeah, I'm so glad I went through that. Even though in the moment it probably felt like, "Ugh, what am I doing? I just need to pick something."
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, sometimes things work out better when they are done out of like a rush, like it has to be done. But sometimes I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna take my time with it, and that's just the person that I am, and it's okay if it delays the process, which I didn't mind. So yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, you already were talking on this, but looking back, because at this point you're like a year and a few weeks in to the program, looking back to who you were a year ago versus today, what are some of the biggest changes you see in yourself or
I
that maybe others have said to you that they've seen in you?
okay, it's been a lot. I feel like one of the big things is like learn to enjoy the process of life or projects, because you might want something so bad in that moment, but in reality is that like nothing comes into your life unless it's not meant to be. I would say that just enjoying the process of life, of projects, of just things that you're working on. Like I said, you might want something so bad, but you have to enjoy the process. You can't rush into things because sometimes like it's not going to end up the way you want to. And I think that working towards personal goals, for example, the podcast, it's a lot of like ups and downs. It's never just a line. It's like full of ups and downs, and I think that just accepting it, that life is just going to go that way. It's never going to go just perfectly fine. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. So I would say that I think that also, one of the big things that I learned and that I really have considered in my life was just taking care of my well-being, like doing things that make me happy, even if it's little things like taking my dog on a walk, making my morning coffee, um, just appreciating life in the small moments that I have and the people that I have in my life, and not worried about the people that are not in my life anymore. That's just a big thing.
That's huge. I'm just sensing, I feel like at the beginning of the program, from your coach's perspective, there was almost like a ton of urgency. And right now, what I'm sensing is just a lot of peace.
Yeah.
Like you were just like, I need to hurry up and get to where I want to go. Not to say that you shouldn't try to make, reach your accomplishments or anything like that. You're still a driven individual. Like you're still looking at what's your next courage project going to be. You're still looking at where's the podcast going to go. But I think it's coming from a place of calmness and ease and fulfillment where before what I got, the sense I got from coaching you was I need to hurry up and get these things done because then I'm going to be fulfilled. And now it's like, no, I'm fulfilled. Now let's go get the things done that I want to do. So it's no longer dependent on accomplishments or accolades or anything like that. It's more about who you are now. And that is one of the most beautiful transformations that I've been able to see in clients, specifically in you.
Yeah, no, everything you said is perfectly aligned with where I am in life. Like, I'm in so much peace. Like you said, like I do work towards goals and I still have, like, I'm very driven towards those goals, but I just try not to put myself under so much pressure. Like, okay, when are we going to move out of my parents' house? Like, should I buy a house? Should I buy a car? Like, are those the next steps for me? And like 2 weeks ago, I got coaching on should I go to grad school? Like, those things still run through my mind, but I'm like, you know what? Like everything is going to fall into place when it's meant to be. And that's okay. Like, I don't need to be in such a rush of like, okay, do I need to take the next steps? Like, what's the next step for me? Because I literally dreamed of this life when I was younger, like having a fulfilling career. I get to travel, I get to explore the world, I get to just spend a lot of time with myself and just learn about myself and prioritize myself right now because I'm still 26. I'm still living with my parents, and I just get to do things like attempt to launch a podcast. Like that's a little like side hobby that I get to do because I have the freedom to do so. So I think like just being proud of where I am now because I worked so hard for it and just appreciating it.
Yeah, that's huge. So, what advice would you have for somebody who maybe was in Anai's shoes a year ago? Maybe they have a desire to launch a podcast or a desire to create content or a desire to pivot their career, or maybe they know they want to work on their confidence, but it's just like even scary to take the first step. what would you say to somebody who's like, I want to make a change, but I don't feel like it's possible?
One of the things that I would recommend is like really researching and looking into communities where you feel like you might fit in. Specifically, like if you're a Latina and you want to fit in a community that's full of Latinas that are working towards something similar as you, I think that that's one of the major things you could do for yourself, and joining programs that really can help you get to where you want to be. I know there's a lot of programs out there. We don't like we're in 2024. It's like really easy to access things and do research online and try to find something, because I feel like if it wasn't for me not joining this program, I don't think I would have ever done the podcast, because I didn't really have anybody. Not that you were like telling me like I have homework, like there wasn't anybody telling me. But if you log in into these meetings weekly and you're surrounded by women who are working towards something similar, like a business, or they're working on themselves trying to build courage, then you kind of like, it's kind of like forcing you to like do your own homework and like focusing on like your tasks to complete your the goal that you want to get into. So I think that's just one of the main things that I would really consider is joining something, and also just like taking time to reflect. Like journaling has been a big shift for me. Like this past year I've journaled. I wasn't really the person to journal back then, but I journal a lot. Mine has to do a little bit more with like my faith and like starting my day off with like reading a verse of the Bible and kind of just journaling about my struggles or what I'm dealing with and what I need help with. So, really connecting to your spirituality or your faith, whatever it is that you believe in, I think that's been helping me tremendously. But I think there's just different ways. But sometimes you kind of need somebody to kind of help you and guide you. And that's probably one of the biggest things.
Love it. I think you're right. Community. I think back to when I started my business. And I'm like, what was the key thing that made me really go after it? And it was being surrounded by other people who understood what I was doing, because I walked away from a tech job and everybody thought I was crazy. They were like, it's the middle of the pandemic. How are you going to do this? And I think if it wasn't for the community that I had met just online, I don't think I would have had the guts to do it. I would have probably still been in the tech industry. So I agree with you. I mean, we hear this saying, right? Like you are the average of the five people that you surround yourself with. But even just from like a law of attraction perspective, what you focus on grows and expands. And if the way that you're spending your time is around other people who are also following their dreams, it's going to rub off on you, right? It's like if you're hanging out with people who every day they drink, you're going to end up drinking more. It doesn't mean you're going to become an alcoholic, right? But you're going to end up drinking more than if you're hanging out with people who go to the gym every day. If you're hanging out with people who go to the gym every day, you're probably going to pick up, a nice fitness routine. And it's true, like we are social beings and we are influenced by the people around us, and we are also influencing the people around us. So also being really intentional about like how are we influencing other people, which I think is why your Courage project has been so key, right? Because like as the eldest daughter of immigrant parents, you're not only setting an example for your younger siblings, but like think about all the other like daughters of immigrants that get to listen to your podcast, and again get to listen to these mentors, and essentially, like I was mentioning, your informational interviews that you're hosting. That's just like a little full circle moment that makes me happy to hear.
Yeah, yeah, no, the way you put it is like, yeah, like I feel like I just want to be able to kind of like you said mentor, like not in like an official mentor, but to be able to be there for other people, because it just heals me so much, because I wish that there was somebody like that for me. And I feel like that's why one of the reasons that like God put me to be the eldest and to like make me the eldest, an older sister, was because I feel like I'm able to like influence and motivate other people, and not just like starting a podcast but also like working out. It's
Mhm.
like a big part of like who I am, is like, oh, like helping motivate other girls to work out and to be consistent and to trying new hobbies, new routines, but also to motivate them to get closer to their spirituality. I've gotten messages like that too. So it just makes me happy, like, to really be that part of some, like, that, be that person in somebody's life.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So let me ask you this. What was your favorite either challenge or tool or piece of coaching that made a difference for you in your journey? I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of little micro things, but looking back, was there either like an aha moment or a specific challenge we did or a tool or strategy that made a big difference in your journey?
I would say, I think whenever I was getting coached on like starting the process, and you reminded me like it's going to be a rough draft. Like, it's never going to be perfect. Like, you're not going to have everything together. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to like come out with the logo that you think is going to be perfect. Like, you just kind of have to put it out there even if you don't think it's ready. And I think that's one of the main piece of advice that I got from you was like, you change it up. You're going to change it up in the future. And it's like, because it's never going to be the perfect moment. It's never going to be the perfect time where you're going to like feel ready. You're never going to be ready. And that's one of the biggest things that I got from coaching. And that's kind of that's what I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have all these 5 things ready, and those are gonna be the main things that I'm gonna have. And once I have them, I'm gonna just go and launch it. And also like having a lot of like, I would say like a lot of the interviews that I initially did were people who actually were the ones who wanted to be in it. Like, you just asked on the coaching call, like, okay, who wants to be interviewed
Yeah.
so we can get the ball rolling? And then there was like all the first
That's the
interview.
power of community. And they
Yeah.
were great interviews.
Yeah, and it was like 5 or 6 of them, and I was like, "Okay, now I really have to start," and, like, that really got the ball rolling, so it really, really helped me,
Mhm.
um, consider the fact that it's not gonna be perfect, it's never gonna be the perfect time, and you just kinda that's just the way that we think so that we don't actually take action. It's like our thoughts really get to us, but yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's one thing that I really do consider till this day is, like, it's never gonna be the perfect time to start something.
Yeah. And tell us if for people who are listening that maybe there's been people who've been like on the wait list for Courage Driven Latina and they've been considering it for a long time, but fear can really creep up, right? Fear in it's not even just like fear of the time and the money, which like those can be factors too, but there's also a fear of like, oh crap, if I do this, like I'm really putting myself out there and then I have to do it. And what if it doesn't work for me? I mean, there's so many thoughts that could come into people's minds. So as somebody who's been through the program once and you're on your second round, like we're working together for 2 more years. So, as somebody who has been through the program, obviously seen enough value to reinvest in it, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to join, but they're afraid?
I mean, I don't there's nothing to really be afraid of. Like, losing money, yeah, like, you might invest in it, but you're never gonna lose money out of something that has to do with building a community, getting support. Like, it's an investment, I would say, and for a lot of people it could be a major investment, but you're not gonna lose anything out of it. And honestly, like, I think it's worth more. The value that I get and what I've gotten is worth way more than the actual amount I've put in, because you get to connect with so many women, you get to learn from a lot of women, and you kind of get the it's kind of like showing up to class. I would say, like, showing up to class. If you show up to class in school, then you're gonna do good. But nobody's gonna tell you to show up. But if you choose to do so, then you're gonna improve and you're gonna actually accelerate your goals. So it's just kind of like a way to help you get closer to your goals and put in the work. It motivates you to put in the work. Like, I already know that I'm like, okay, if I show up to this class on Tuesday, like, I'm gonna get something done. And compared to like you not investing in something, it's kind of just going to delay the process, I would say. Because for me, if I didn't invest in this, I probably would have never started it just because I would delay the process myself. So just being motivated, and like we've mentioned already, being surrounded by like-minded women who are creating things within themselves. And I think that, yeah, like I've met so many women. I've also gained a lot of like clarity of like the woman that I want to become, the woman that I am. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would say go for it. I mean, just find something that you want to work on and really try to see if Erica really resonates with what you are thinking, your values, and go from there. But I think it's just like listening to your intuition. It is risky, but everything in life is risky if you invest in it.
Yeah, it's like that saying of everything's hard, right? Like going after what you want is hard, but staying where you are is also hard. So like you get to pick your hard. Would you want to work towards something you want, or do you want to stay where you are and keep thinking about the thing you want to do?
Exactly. Exactly.
Amazing. Anai, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. I'm sure that you have inspired many people who are listening who have a lot of the same fears that you had and, still have sometimes. And I think you've really shown people through this interview that even when it feels like it's not possible to achieve your goals, they are possible, and it's not something that happens from one day to the other, and it's still possible to take action even with self-doubt, even with fear, because at the core we're all human beings, right? We're not just going to eliminate it and become this like confident person from one day to the other. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. We appreciate you coming back onto the podcast, and I will see you on our next call.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. Make sure to visit theericacruz.com. That's Erica with a K, where you can subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. You can help this podcast grow by supporting me with an Apple Podcast rate and review. If you took anything away from this episode, I invite you to take a screenshot and share it on social media so that your favorite badass Latinas can also check it out. Be sure to tag me at the Erica Cruz. That's Erica with a K, because you know I want to see it. If you're ready to join the revolution and be a part of the Courage Driven Latina community, visit couragedrivenlatina.com to get more information and join the waitlist. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.